Today's lesson, we're going to talk about a parable. I'll tell you what parables are, and we're going to finish the Scarlet Letter, the story at least. So when Dimmesdale got back to town, he felt like a fraud. He went around people talking to them, and he felt different. He saw them in a new light, and it was kind of odd. And he felt like somebody who was benefiting from his sin, and he was running away from it, and he wasn't fessing up to it. So he kind of... at this point, you realize that maybe it's not going to be happily ever after. We have some interactions between Hester and Chillingworth, whatever, but everything culminates in the ceremony. It's like a festival. It's electing the new governor. Bellingham died. He's a character from the beginning. He died, and they're appointing a new one. Dimmesdale's given the speech, and it's an unbelievable, rousing speech. It's just powerful. It's the best speech he's ever given. Sermon, I mean. And he's up there on the scaffold. This is the third of the three scaffold moments that I told you were in the novel. One at the beginning, one midway through, and then one at the end. And he just calls Hester and Pearl to the scaffold up there with him in front of everybody. Remember, this is what Pearl asked him to do, and he said, no, this is at the middle of the book. And so he basically, without telling everybody, tells everybody, and he apologizes, he goes on and on and on, and he apologizes, and then he, impassionedly growing, the tone is growing, and the fervor in his voice, and then he just, remember, he's been holding his chest this whole time. For like a long time, he's been holding his chest. Pain. We thought it was his heart, but it wasn't. So he rips it open, and he's got something there. He's got like a growth. He's got like a something there. And they don't say what it is exactly. But in the next chapter at the end, some people say it looked like an A. All right? And it was, okay? Now it leaves it up to Hawthorne leaves it up to the reader to whatever whatever it was. Some people said it looked like this. Some people said it looked like an A. Whatever. Point being is that it in my opinion, it was an A, symbolic of the Scarlet Letter, where he was keeping his sin and his shame on the inside, and outwardly everybody loved him, and he was a hypocrite. But the secret guilt was doing something to him on the inside, and it was manifesting itself, symbolizing adultery with what was going on with Hester. He falls down on the scaffold. He's about to die. Chillingworth comes up and says, "This is the one place that I could not get you. You have saved your soul." The reason why he saved his soul is because he's admitted what he did. He's admitted it. And now he can die at peace. He reaches out to Pearl. He acknowledges Hester. And he tells Hester, look, if we're not in hell, which, because they're Puritans. So he said, if God forgives us if we're not in hell, we will rejoin one another in the next life. It's very tragic, but it's very romantic at the same time. And then he dies. Then we have the final chapter. It's kind of like just a wrap-up. That's where the people say, well, it looked like a letter A, or it looked like this. Then they talk a little bit about what happened at Chillingworth. He doesn't have Dimmesdale to torment, to hold on to anymore, so he withers and dies within the next year. He leaves all of his money to Pearl. He doesn't say why he leaves all of his money to Pearl. Maybe he sees her as like, an innocent in all this, and there's no one left, and he feels guilty for what he did. Throughout the book, it talks about how Chillingworth, he's old to begin with, but he becomes more and more, the more he's been on vengeance, the more it eats away and it poisons his soul, and he becomes hunched over and more ghoulish looking. All right, it's very identity characters. Hester becomes stronger and her head raises higher, because she admits and she takes it. She's not afraid. She doesn't hide. Dimmesdale suffers and he gets weaker because his guilt and his hypocrisy tears him apart. And Chillingworth, vengeance poisons his soul, and it's just horrible. it's intimated that Pearl goes overseas and she meets somebody and she like almost becomes a princess. Hester goes with her and stays with her and whatever, and then all of a sudden, years and years later, Hester comes back to the town, to the town, and she lives in the same little cottage. And people see her, and they don't really know who she is, and they're seeing the A. And some people are saying, "Well, I remember this woman named with A, and it meant Abel." They completely forgot about her sins. They moved on. They forgot about the Scarlet Letter and the adultery, etc. And then it says that and she dies, and she's buried next to Dimmesdale. The end. It's just an awesome piece of literature, and sometimes I don't teach it because the language, it's not hard to read if you're supposed to be reading it. It's not hard to read, but it's written in a way that's not written now. It's not Shakespearean or anything like that or Old English, but they used to write much more formal back then, whereas they would take this much to write one or two sentences. Now we take this much. We're much simpler in our writing now. The most lyrical are people like Cormac McCarthy or even Stephen King, and they're still nothing compared to Hawthorne and the ways they wrote back then. All right, so now we're going to talk about parables. And here's a Jewish parable about the worst sin is what it's called. And I want to talk about again how people put us in boxes and the measure of a sin, like are all sins equal, etc. All right, let's get reading. Okay, a parable. This is a parable, the worst sin. Basically, some people have a hard time understanding what a parable is. Basically, this is the textbook definition. A parable is a succinct story in prose or verse, which means poetry or literature writing, regular, that illustrates one or more instructive lessons or principles. It differs from a fable in that fables employ animals, plants, inanimate objects, or forces of nature as characters, whereas parables have human characters. Parable is a type of metaphorical analogy. Now, you may be saying, I still don't know what a parable is. Basically, a parable is a life lesson, a moral, to where you have to think a little bit about it to understand what it's saying. It's kind of like a puzzle, a type of sort of riddle, but much more, longer than that. The most famous example of parables are in the Christian Bible, the New Testament, whereas Jesus taught in parables. The importance of this is basically, in a parable, it's not just coming straight out and telling somebody to do something or telling somebody this is wrong. The story is an illustration of why something is wrong, but you got to figure it out on your own. You got to put a little work into it. It's not a straight order. It's this is what needs to happen. Why does it need to happen? What am I trying to tell you here? You got to think about it a little bit. Okay. So this here, the most famous examples of parables are in the Christian Bible. But there are other parables, including this one here, The Worst Sin by Joshua Salik. All right, so how do we judge what is right and wrong? Are there some actions that are better or worse than others? These are just a few of the questions raised in the story by Joshua Salik. Now, the reason why I picked this text is because I paired after we finished chapter 23, but we went ahead and finished the novel, and I want students to be able to draw the connections, thematic connections across two different texts about morality and sin. So this parable and the Scarlet Letter. And I want you to consider how the characters in both, particularly God and Dimmesdale, because God's a character in this, view the severity of sin. What sin is worse according to the short story, and how does this apply to Hester and Dimmesdale? So I'm going to read it. It was on Yom Kippur, the Jewish Judgment Day. After taking care of all the easy cases, it was time to judge the heavy sinners. They were all going to hell for sure, but even in hell, there are bad places and worse places, and each of the sinners had to be assigned his proper place. And this is just a story, so if you have different, religious beliefs, theological beliefs, this is just a story. Don't let those, threaten anything. There are 7 chambers in hell. Chamber 1 is bad, but not as bad as Chamber 2. Chamber 2 is worse than Chamber 1, but still not nearly as bad as Chamber 3, and the worst is Chamber 7. After sitting in his chair, God told the bailiff, "Okay, send in the first sinner." The first sinner came in. "What is his sin?" God asked the clerk. "He's a thief. He stole things that did not belong to him." "What exactly did he steal?" asked God. "You name it," said the clerk. "When he was a small boy, he stole toys from other children. He stole money from his mother. When he grew up, he stole cars. People worked all their lives to get those things. He just took them." Said God. "This is bad. I'll give him a break. You put him in Chamber 1. The bailiff took the sinner out. "Okay," said God. "Send in the second sinner." Second sinner stepped in. "What sins did he commit?" asked God. "He is a bigot," said the clerk. "He hates everybody who is different from him. He hates people with different skin colors, different religions, and different accents. He offended people, discriminated against them, and made their lives miserable." "Well, this really makes me angry," said God. "I created all those people, and I created them equal. No one is better or worse than the others, so send him to Chamber 4. Bailiff took the sinner out. "Do we have more?" God asked the clerk. "I'm afraid so," said the clerk. "Then what exactly are we waiting for?" God told the bailiff. "Bring in the next one." The third sinner entered the room. "What did he do?" asked God. "He's a liar," said the clerk. "And to whom did he lie?" asked God. "To everybody," said the clerk. "He lied to his parents, he lied to his teachers, he lied to his friends, to his wife, even to his children. Everybody. He cheated people out of their money. He even lied to the police and had innocent people put in jail." "Well, this is bad. Take him to Chamber 2. How many more do we have?" "4, said the clerk. "4?" God sighed. "This job's getting harder and harder. Maybe I'm getting older. Looks like every year we have more sinners." "All right, send in the next one." The bailiff brought in the 4th sinner. "What is his sin?" God asked. "He was cruel to animals," replied the clerk. "He beat dogs, cut lizards' tails off, burnt cats, plucked the legs off cockroaches." "Oh, God. Excuse me. Okay, God sick. I've heard enough." He turned to the sinner and said, "Do you know who created these animals? I did. When you hurt them, you're hurting me. I'm sending you to Chamber 5. "Chamber 5, the sinner could not believe his ears. "You heard me," God answered. "I'm ready for the next one," God told the bailiff. "Bring him in." The next sinner showed up. "What did he do?" "Just a minute," said the clerk. "I need to check my notes." "Okay," God said. "But hurry up. We don't have all day, you know." "Here," said the clerk. "A few minutes. I found it. This guy was irresponsible." "What do you mean?" "He left his family, a wife and 5 children, as if it wasn't bad enough for his children to grow up without a father. He also took all the money and left them with nothing. His wife had to take 3 jobs to put food on the table," the clerk said. "Well, what did he do with the money?" "He spent it, or more correctly, wasted it on his own pleasures," the clerk said. "He bought himself a new car, a new boat, he gambled, he drank, that kind of stuff." "This guy makes me sick," said God. "I have no sympathy for him. Put him in Chamber 3. "Shall we take a break?" asked the clerk. "No," said God. "Let's get it over with. Bring in the next one." The next sinner was brought in. "And what is he here for?" "This is a heavy one," said the clerk. "He's a killer. He took from people the most important thing, their lives." "I'm not sure that this is the most important thing," God interrupted the clerk, "but it's very important. Continue. Not only did he take the lives of victims, he also ruined the lives of their families, caused pain to their friends." Okay, said God. "I get the picture, and I agree with you. That's a very heavy sin. I'm the one who gives life, and I'm the only one who can take it away. Put him in Chapter 6. Is he the last one?" "No," said the clerk. "There is one more. And I thought we've had all the possible sins. What did he do?" "Nothing," said the clerk. "What do you mean, nothing?" asked God. "Then why is he here? Doing nothing may be lazy, but it isn't a sin last time I checked." Well, then check again," said the clerk. "I believe that doing nothing is a horrible sin." "How so?" The guy saw horrible crimes and did nothing to prevent them. He saw people cheated, did not tell them truth. He saw animals tortured, did not treat them. He saw bigotry and did not fight it. He saw injustice, did not correct it. He saw children starving and did not feed them. He saw people attacked, did not defend them. I accuse him of the worst sin, indifference. It's people like him who make all the other sins possible." "You know what," said God, "you've convinced me. This is the worst sin. He belongs in Chapter 7, in Chamber 7. All right. So again, this is just a parable. God is not presented here as omniscient. It's trying to point out a lesson to you. You can see the way how different people were brought in and what they were judged. This is very similar to a fable, but used with animals or inanimate objects. The fable is trying to get a point across, but you have to think about it. You have to work to it. It's not just telling you out and out the answer. You got to think about it. All right. Judging the difference in sin. Is there a difference in sin? How does this relate to Hester and Dimmesdale? All right, let's answer our questions. Number 1, the answer is B. Which of the following best reflects the theme of this story? Seeing justice and doing nothing is worse than injustice itself. I think the old saying is, all it takes for evil to triumph is good men to do nothing. It's pretty much what it is. People can be inherently flawed. Even the best of us have extreme weaknesses, and that's the best of us. So those of us who aren't the best of us, and they have ill intent or just selfish, psychopathic, sociopathic intent, have nothing holding them back if good men don't do anything. And that's what the clerk judged as the worst sin. Number 2, part A, at the end of the story, the bailiff declares that the last man committed the worst sin, indifference. What is indifference? C, not standing up for what's right. 3, which detail from the story best supports the answer? The answer is C, he saw injustice, did not correct it. Now, describe the relationship between God and the bailiff in this story. How is this relationship significant to the story's plot? All right. So, answers are vary here. But what I think is like I said, God is not presented as omniscient. In other words, all-knowing here. All right. He relies on other people. He takes advice from the bailiff, who provides, counsel regarding the sinners. In a couple instances, the two even disagree, and God tells the bailiff he is not sure a person's life is the most important thing, but is convinced by the bailiff that indifference is the greatest sin. Bailiff, meanwhile, appears to be a friend and a trusted advisor to God, who keeps up on the operations of judgment. His chief of staff may advise a high-ranking, the president. He does not presume to have the final say on the judgment of sinners, but he is free to express his opinion. Okay, let's go down here. Where's number 1? Do you agree that indifference is the worst crime? Explain your answer. That's up to you. I just told you about good men not doing anything. What are some examples of indifference not mentioned in the story? Not responding in your life, not responding to bullying, maybe. You see somebody doing something wrong and you don't step in, etc. This text references ideas from religion that you may or may not choose to believe. What are those ideas? Why is it important to learn the ideas of different cultures? That's up to you. All right, let's go back here. What was our parable? Parables are a very important part of life. I was going to say just literature, but they're a very important part of life. And I really suggest that you Google parables. And of course, yes, the most famous ones that are going to come up are the ones from the Bible, the Christian Bible, but there are many others. Even fables, fairy tales have a lot of moral lessons in them that are parables. You have to work to get the answer. I like them because it's not black and white. You got to think about it. And so here, we've completed the Scarlet Letter, and it's really up to you. It's up to you about what do you think in the idea of sin. That's what Hawthorne was working for here. He had lots of other themes, but basically, to me, the main theme is it better to go ahead and take it, your punishment, in simple terms, or to hide it? There's always expressions about the truth is going to have its day. No matter how much deep you bury something, it's going to stink. Truth will out. It's a common expression. So what should you do? Can you keep a secret, that big of a secret, forever? I don't know. We saw what happened to Dimmesdale. It killed Dimmesdale. And we saw what happened to Hester. So really, it's just your opinion. In the end, it's just a lesson on life and a moral story and a lesson that Hawthorne was trying to teach us. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to go over The Fall of the House of Usher. The Fall of the House of Usher is a famous short story written by Edgar Allan Poe. All you have to do is read it. Now, I'm not going to sit and read you the whole story because it's a long story. But it's very famous, and it has good lessons and morals, and I always end my Scarlet Letter unit with this, and then Young Goodman Brown, which is the story we'll do the next day. Read it. I'm going to tell you who Edgar Allan Poe was, and then we're going to go over the answers. So tomorrow will be a relatively short lesson, as will the next day, because I'm not going to sit and read the whole thing to y'all, because that would bore you to death, and me too. So, till I see you again, it's a great day to be a warrior.